Ladies and gentlemen, moving on, next in line, the CHRO Power Panel on HR Tech and AI, a deep dive into opportunities and benefits. It is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelist and moderator to you all. Our first panelist is an extraordinary individual and leader whose career spans over 18 years of transforming HR landscapes. A true architect of strategy, our speaker has introduced numerous initiatives to streamline processes and harness organizational growth opportunities. His expertise in maintaining harmonious relations between management and employees, along with the knack for driving technological and effective people management, makes him a pivotal figure in the HR realm. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Vice President and Head HR at SRM Technologies, Bala Vumidi. Thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is celebrated HR leader with a wealth of experience in various domains such as talent planning, resource management, and talent acquisition. A champion of diversity and inclusivity and a steward of HR compliance and wellness, his contributions have been recognized with the prestigious Chief People Officers Award from Cognizant in January 2010. And if that wasn't enough, rumor has it that he can also juggle, though not always apples, more like a couple of HR tasks at once. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Senior Vice President of People Operations at Indium Software, Mahendran Dilli. Welcome, sir. Our next panelist brings 2 decades of extensive HR experience across diverse domains such as IT, manufacturing, insurance, core HR consulting, and business services. Known for her prowess in organizational development, culture building, and business and HR transformation, this individual excels in aligning people's strategy with business needs. She's an effective communicator and problem solver, passionate about driving excellence. And just between us, she's probably the one person who can handle an HR emergency with a cup of coffee in one hand and a phone in the other, without breaking a sweat. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Vice President of Human Resources at Wenger and Watson Incorporation, Soumya Ramanathan. Welcome, Soumya. Our fourth and final speaker has over 22 years of experience across industries such as manufacturing, telecom, and logistics. His experience spans recruitment, performance management, compensation, operations, training and development, competency development, manpower planning, resource management, and employee engagement. The entire platter is full. With a track record of driving organizational development and assessment centers, this individual brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion. And fun fact, he's the only person we know who can transform HR strategies while keeping his cool better than a Zen master in a meditation retreat. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the head HR of ESAB India, Jamon Anthony. Welcome, Mr. Anthony. Now to guide us through the enriching discussion, we have an esteemed and a beautiful moderator with a multi-award winning track record in HR, D&I, communications, and L&D. Our moderator is an industry-recognized HR leader with 25 years of experience across multiple industry sectors and geographies, including the US, India, and Western Europe. Listed in India's 40 under 40 for HR leadership, she has built and scaled award-winning centers of excellence for people and talent. Beyond her professional achievements, our moderator is also an HR advisor and consultant to founders, CEOs, and boards of social purpose organizations, a co-creator of Miranjali, and a published author, poetess, and short story writer. And let's just say, if HR leadership was an Olympic sport, she'd have a shelf full of gold medals by now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and chief advisor, Smita Venkataraman. Welcome, Smita, over to you.
So a very warm welcome everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of our wonderful esteemed panelists here. The next 60 minutes, actually we have some time for audience poll as well. So I would say about 40 minutes plus another 10 minutes maybe, where we would be very happy to take audience questions and respond from our end. What we have planned is a series of questions which we hope will answer many of the areas that some of us were discussing during the networking session when we met between 5 and 5:30 today. I'd like to start with a quote actually by Simon Sinek, and I know his book was also there outside at the registration desk, and many of you may have potentially picked a copy of it. So Simon Sinek is a world-famous author and inspirational speaker, and he has made this beautiful comment where he says, when people are invested financially, they want returns. But when people are invested emotionally, they want to contribute. How beautiful it is, which sums up the spirit of HR in each one of us here in the wonderful audience that we have here, where all of us are actually juggling so many different hats in our day-to-day life. In fact, many of us, we were discussing about the talent market, how difficult it is to source and find the right talent. And then when we bring them on board, how do we assimilate them into our culture? So we're also culture custodians. Then comes retention, succession planning, seat at the board, seat at the table, helping business, looking at margins, driving revenue, looking at cost efficiencies, driving automation, the list goes on. And even when people decide to leave, how do we create brand ambassadors walking out of our offices so that they refer more good talent, so that we are able to acquire the right talent at the right spot at the right time. So on that note, we'd like to also start off with a bang with an audience poll. I would request the HROne team to please flash the first audience poll question. Anshika, if you could please help us with that, the first poll question, please. It's on Mentimeter, so there will be a code that would appear, and you can just whip out your cell phones and enter the code. Can I have the website? You're going to be flashing that as well. So they will be putting the name of the website. So please type in the website name, and then you can add in the code, and you'll be able to see the audience poll question. We'd love to get your answers, and we'll be able to see the results, and we'll immediately get started with beautiful questions from you for our panelists today. As we are waiting for the question to come up, if I had to ask each one of our esteemed panelists, if there is a movie that you could think of which you feel talks about some powerful HR tips, and if you had to just share any 2 tips from those movies, what would those be? Bala?
I'll take it first. Thank you, BP, for setting the stage on fire. We have 5 seats now. Unfortunately, it's only for 100% HR. Okay. So good evening all, and thank you HROne for having me here. So one movie it always touched me is Moneyball. I'm not sure how many of you watched the movie Moneyball. So Moneyball, it's all about a baseball team. They will be appointing a manager. They will not have funds to run, like let's say IPL for that matter. So in IPL you can easily figure out which is the costliest team or which team is having a star cast, right? So this particular team, unfortunately, they didn't have funds. So they have to go with underrated players, or they have to compromise on the quality of the players, or they can attract talent, or they can attract star players to do a lot of campaign. So they appointed a manager. So the manager is responsible for setting up the team. So this movie been casted really well. The story goes like this, right? It's how a data can pick a right team. Our data. If you see in entire movie, each and every team will be having a star players, but these guys, because of the limited budget, they can't. So this manager, what he did, he picked up the underrated players or undervalued players. How he picked? Completely on data. He was checking who can be a good forward, or probably in cricket terms, who can hit straight drives, who can hit power hits in the power play, or who can play a good keeper, or who can be a good fast bowler, who can pace it 140, 150 consistently, right? So that's the data-driven approach he has taken, and he has reviewed the entire set of players and he has picked them up, right? And then he always chose to have a different practice or probably a different idea how to enable a team, right? So he didn't have, or he had a lot of courage to make a lot of changes. So he clearly said, you should, or the movie clearly says, you should actually go without resistance for any change. So these are two things I would say. One is data-driven, and next is resistance for change. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you so much. So data-driven approach and managing change, the right way, the constructive way. And we are also ready, incidentally, with the poll question. We just talked about change, so boom, here's a quick change of pace. So you'll be able to see the question on the screen. There's a code over there as well. And there's also a website, menti.com, menti.com. You can just type in the code, and you'll be able to give us a live vote. We request all of our valued audience members to kindly participate, because you'll be able to see the results reflecting there. Okay. So we've got the first bar already on frequently, waiting for more. Wonderful. Okay. And the numbers are changing. The pink bar seems to be going up a little. Blue continues to lead. And we're getting a lot of thumbs ups as well. This is almost like watching a attrition dashboard at times.
So for me, I'm thinking of 4th June.
Okay, great. Okay, we also got a red. Okay. But by far, the blue seems to be definitely leading the roost in terms of the importance of balancing between our management team, our business goals, executive leadership teams asks of us, and employee aspirations, employee needs, the members of various departments that you're working with, and what you're seeing in the talent market. And that's a classic case of the delicate balance that all of us often have to actually manage. So let me turn to Jaiman here. Jaiman, you know, when we talk about upskilling, reskilling, talent development, making sure that people are aligned to what skills, knowledge are required, how have you as an HR head been able to bring that delicate balance between what the CEO's office wants, the management wants, and what the employees actually require?
Okay. Hope I'm audible. Yeah. So what we have done is, in various organizations which I've worked, I mean, we have seen that you have to develop your skills, then you go into various functions, you get promoted, and you do certain things. So, but is that what actually the employee wants? So what we did in one of my previous assignment was, we checked the career aspiration of an employee, not what the organization wants, but what the employee wants it to be in. For example, if a person is in sales, his aspiration may not be to grow in sales, it may be to grow in marketing, or maybe to come to HR, or go to finance. Which we had examples where in one of the organizations which we worked, where there were people who were in the customer service department who came to HR. There were people from sales who moved completely from there to the networks team. It is one of those telecom companies which I worked. So we capture the career aspiration of the employees, and then we see what skills they require to reach that aspiration. So one of the challenges what our CEO was asking was at that point of time is that, see, you give the skills and the competencies what that employee wants. Then how does it help the organization? Because if the guy is in sales, he has to grow in sales. But if the guy wants to, I mean, guy means girl, or the guy, I mean, it's gender neutral. So that person wants to move into marketing, then how does it help us, or the organization? So what we told the CEO was that, see, when an employee wants to move into a different function, and that is what that employee wants to be in, definitely the employee will be working with that more passion, right? Because that's what I wanted to be, and if the organizations give me an opportunity to move there. So that is what we did, and it worked very well. Though so the CEO was apprehensive in the beginning, initial times, but it went very well, and of course then it was, he became a big ambassador or evangelist for that kind of a thing. So instead of doing the normal talent reviews or skill development, we capture the career aspirations of the associates, and then help them to grow into that. And we clearly knew that at some point of time they will leave the organization. They may join some other company. That was fine for us, no issues. But we could help the employee to attain or at least go through that path of his or her aspiration. So that is how we balance the goals, and that company actually, it was actually a greenfield project for us out here. And we break even within the 4th year, and in telecom it's not easy to break even in 4th year. When I was talking about somewhere in around 15 years back, when there were around, in Tamil Nadu, we had around 13 operators, and we were the 9th operator who came into the state. So now, of course, you have only some 3 or 4 operators, but at that point of time, it was completely different. A lot of new entrants, and everybody wants people, everybody wants ready-made talent, because you won't get otherwise to roll out your telecom. So this is what we did out there. So I believe that's how HR can play a big role, because normally, traditionally, the CEO will think, no, that's not how it grows. But we as a HR leaders, we have to think strategically and then bring out with these ideas to the senior leadership team or the board and get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's a beautiful point you raised, because what you're saying is that, one, we do our mapping of employee aspirations, and two, speak the business language and make sure that the two are able to get aligned. My question to Bala, for example, Bala, if you could just weigh in on what Chairman just shared. Have you been in situations where sometimes it was not possible to do this alignment, where the goals were different at a business level and the employee aspirations were not necessarily in alignment? How did you go about being the advocate for both?
Yeah, it's always, the HR, I always say, we need to do the proper balancing act, right? So we can't, like what BP said, right? So we need to be always right. Is it possible? I always hear this probably from my beginning of my career, even till date. People used to come in, right? Hey, HR has come. HR, when associates talk about us, they say, hey, management has come, right? When we go for any board discussion, they say, hey, come on, you talk for business, right? So it's always a tricky situation for HR to balance both the act. It's quite difficult because we all agree with it. But how and what value we can add matters a lot, right? We need to resonate to the audience, as the keynote speaker said, right? So when you go and talk to CEO, you need to talk with metrics. What initiatives we can bring that can change organization? Of course, end of the day, everything boils down to the top line and bottom line. It's going to impact the business. Of course, CEO will take a neutral stand to see what is there for employees in the journey as well, right? So quite important for all the HR leaders or for HR career professionals, right? We need to understand what are the CEO goals, first and foremost, and make that part of our goals, right? And understand the BU goals as well. See, if you see in my organization, there is the process shift we have done. If I have to take my goals, I have to sit with the BUs, understand their goals, right? And I take some of their goals as my goals. And my goals should be aligned to the BUs. And my goals should be aligned to the CEOs. And we sit and we discuss on overall goals and see if all the goals are being aligned. Right? That's quite important for us. And of course, that's a waterfall effect we use to set the goals for all the levels till the trainee. That's quite important, right? That is perspective, the goals, right? How to build trust, because trust plays a vital element over here, Smita, because if we can create the trust, a bond between the CEO and employee, then things changes a lot. Like your quote said, right? What is in for me, right? Do I get a value from the organization, right? That's quite important. So we need to create a lot of avenues or probably channels for CEO to interact with employees to gain the trust. It can be, we conduct a lot of town halls. We conduct a lot of various forums or coffee sessions with the management, right? That's quite important. But what is after that plays a vital role, because we always have a town halls and then we wait for next quarter for next town hall. But between those two town halls, what happens matters a lot, right? Understand the employees. Are we giving it back to the employees? Like what Jay said, today for HR, I've seen most of the goals what we have taken, right? They're all okay, checklist, I've completed. But are they the ones required for the employees? That matters a lot, right? We bring a lot of technologies, of course. We'll be definitely touching upon AI. But is that what employee wants? Is it going to benefit the employees, all those initiatives? That's quite important for us. So we need to understand from employee perspective and then balance that. It can be on career, it can be on facilities, it can be on compensation, it can be on benefits. So how we can take that and bring that as an initiative from a HR plays a vital role, because over here, building the trust or creating the avenue or creating that success, it depends on the HR, ensuring there is a balance between what CEO wants and employee wants, right? I'll just give a typical example. See today, like what we said, do we have a seat in the board, right? Quite honestly, this is my perspective. HR, are we talking business? That matters a lot. When we go to any room, like what BP said, when you go to sales, talk about sales initiatives. When you go to finance, talk about numbers. I personally feel HR, probably we need to talk more about business. How business operates, we need to understand. And what initiatives we bring that will help them to grow, right? It can be anything, because every BU, they will have a different perspective, right? Today, I might be driving bottom line because of the market is going crazy. So people are always driving for GM today, gross margin. Are we bringing initiatives towards taking measures on gross margin? What is that? Resource management. Always resource management comes into picture. Are we managing our bench pool in a linear way? If not, what we can do, how we can upskill, or how we can transform that to a revenue opportunity, right? That kind of conversations we need to have with the CEO. Are we giving the insights? Because today, the dashboards, what we create, I've always seen, I used to tell my team, right? Hey, fine, I have brought my attrition from so-and-so percentage to so-and-so percentage. I have onboarded 45 people. I have done 50 initiatives. Definitely my BU or CEO or none of the CEOs will be interested to see this. Of course, this is a check. I mean, this is a responsibility to do that. But how it has transformed or helped the business cause, that plays a vital role. So are we giving the insights, business insights, what CEO wants? If we can bring that change, definitely we'll be having a seat. And we can also determine the seat like what Deepti said.
Thank you very much. A very beautiful point you made was on trust building, and trust building comes, again, I think the one common theme that's resonating session after session is speaking the language of the person that we are relating to, be it the employee or the executive leadership office. Business metrics when it comes to CEO's office, empathy with the employee in terms of career development, compensation, what's in it for you, and constantly building trust on both sides. So thank you to both of you for bringing up these beautiful points. That takes us to the next audience poll question, but before we do that, a quick question just to show off hands. How many of us in our current organizations actually are aware of our overall business goals? Business goals. The financial metrics. Excellent, excellent. That's very heartening to see. So definitely we are on the right path, because when we have clarity, then we can connect the numbers back to our employees.
One tip here, sorry.
Yes.
I went to my friend's company recently. He visited, he invited me to the office. I've seen in all the meeting rooms, right, they have a big poster that was giving goals of the CEO, goals of all the business heads, goals of the support functions leaders as well. That was actually very good, very good initiative, so that people will get to know more about the company values, company goals through that.
Thank you, Bala. So publicity, visibility of what can be shared. Of course, there may be some metrics which may still be internal or confidential, but what can be shared can be freely shared. We would request the audience to please go back to your cell phone screens onto menti.com. Add the code. The next question is up on your screens. We'd love to get your votes. Which of these has been most challenging in your experience? There are multiple options. Okay, getting buy-in and driving change management are head-to-head. It's a tie. And change management wins. Okay. Consensus building is inching close. Change management is still an issue. Okay. Change management is clearly leading the race right now. Okay, driving change management by far, it's an absolute winner. in terms of the number of respondents who have said that is the biggest challenge that we are facing. I would like to turn to our esteemed panelist, Soumya, to share with us her experience, direct experience, in terms of some of the change management initiatives that you have led for your organization, Soumya, and how did you go about it?
Thank you, Smita. Am I audible? Yeah, I guess I am. So, good evening, Chennai. Good to be here. And I'd like to share from my direct experience of driving change management in one of the companies that I worked some time ago, maybe about 5-6 years back. So, let's start with this. Can all of you start running and rolling in this room? How many of you are willing to do that now? That's exactly what change management in organizations is. So I hardly had any show of even 2 hands, 3 hands there. So this is exactly what it spells to employees when we talk about change of any kind. So I'm going to draw from an experience of driving a culture change in that company, where I'll take one specific experience there. What has come as feedback from many of the employees who were leaving the organization was that they were being treated as beggars at the time of leaving. So they have to beg at every stage of that relieving cycle. Right from the time they initiate the exit email, right up to the time the relieving order is given. Every bit of that exercise for them is like begging. And there was so much bad blood around. So we had to change this, and most of this actually was from the leadership itself. We are talking about founder, CEO, and business heads themselves, where any exit initiative is seen as, exit is a bad word, I can't resign. If I've spent 6 months and I want to leave, then it's an early exit. If I spent 6 years and leave, then it's backstabbing. And if I spent 16 years and I'm leaving, it's like killing the organization. So, I mean, everyone has aspirations, everyone has a need to move for various reasons. That should be respected. And therefore, what was happening was there was a lot of negativity going around, even from the employees who had left already. So we had to infuse some positivity here, make that entire experience worthy for us and for the employees to look at the organization, come back again and work if there's an opportunity. Look at our organization as something worth reckoning, in spite of whatever has happened now and they had been forced to exit. So this is the change that we wanted to drive. And therefore, I had to start right from the CEO and go down right up to the manager to explain how this entire process should be handled in terms of employee experience. So we drove this initiative called, we all know pre-hire to rehire, right, retire, right? So we just turned it off a little more and said pre-hire to rehire. And we brought in a lot of branding around rehire, and we actually spelled out at every stage of that employee experience what all needed to be done to make that experience of the exiting employee more organized, more structured, more pleasant, more reckon-worthy in terms of the kind of positive experiences that he or she is having, and wherever we could retain, why not? So that way, qualitatively and quantitatively, we started tracking the experience. And we had a championing group, because it's not enough, the HR feels that the experience needs to change. It has to go from the business leaders and the managers themselves. So we had workshops for the managers and for the leaders to understand why that exiting experience is so critical, because tomorrow it is an advertisement, it's a branding for your organization, from people who leave your organization. Therefore, from there we started and we drove it. And we even brought in initiatives of having town halls with employees who have left. And it was a wonderful journey in making that happen. It was part of the culture journey, actually. This was just one small experience within the culture journey. And eventually, when I had left the organization, I was pleasantly surprised. About 6 months later, I had an invitation to address the town hall in that company. So it was such a fulfilling change management initiative. All that we had to do is to understand the current state, the desired state, to look at how to move between these 2 points and define very critical steps in the process. Follow that, make sure that you're consistent, get the buy-in of the audience. In the audience here, we mean manager, the business heads, the CEO. Right from the top, it has to go down. And once that buy-in is there and the ownership is also taken, I think the march is very easy. And it was definitely a very regaling experience for me to go back to the same organization and experience what I had started as a culture change initiative, one very small piece of that culture change initiative, where I went back and I enjoyed that experience with them. So change, yes, is the constant, but there will be resistance. There is this rubber band effect, right, as I call it. These are all very simple theories. So there is something that's holding you back. There is something in between, which is the resistance. And there is also a pull from the other side, which should be there. So I think change management is definitely going to be difficult, not a cakewalk, but it is possible, it is doable, and in our own experiences, we probably will realize it eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya. That was such a refreshing example of change management, because usually when we talk change management, we talk about policies getting rolled out and employees sending complaints and grievances saying why they don't want that policy, please take it back. But you gave us such a beautiful example of culture, of mindset. And if we had to pick 3 beautiful values that Soumya just shared with us from her direct experience, from this example, the first is she talked about the demonstration of empathy. Why were people resisting? Understand, put yourself in their shoes. Then sensitization, having workshops for managers, creating awareness, because sometimes we tend to do things and we're not even aware why we are doing that. So that was the second step she talked about, sensitization. And third is communication, making sure that all the dots are getting connected. So empathy, right? Sensitization was a second, and third is communication. Thank you so much for that brilliant example, Soumya. Mahindran, I have a question for you, just picking up from the audience poll. You know, we've all been talking about metrics, and anytime you Google HR metrics, there are at least 60 to 70 different metrics that HR professionals are told, here's your master list, right? From your experience, what are those top 3 or 4 metrics that you would like to share with all of us, saying that start with this. This is what you need to measure, so we are talking business results. Over to you.
Thank you, Smita. Good evening, Chennai. Glad to see all of you on a Friday evening. And I was just thinking about it, right? Saying that HROne, with your passion of driving things with a purpose, driving a movement, I think kudos to all your effort. See, I think when it comes to metrics, I think many of the companies or many of the HR leaders keep complicating things slightly bigger than what it should ideally be, right? Because typically, if you go back and look at your own KRAs or scorecards, how many of you have goals more than 7 to 8 in your KRA list when you fill up your appraisal? Yeah? More than 7 to 8 goals, right, that you're tracking, part of your, though many are not raising, go back to your year-end appraisal form, I'm sure, right, it runs in pages for many. But it is easy to say that I'll do 20 things, but no, without really getting to the crux of, going back to what Bharat and Prahlad was talking about, right, going to the crux of what the company wants, what the CEO wants, right. See, the most important fact of drawing any metrics for the moment, I don't want to specifically go back and preach the choir saying what metrics you should have, but if you just go back to the analogy of why do we have a metric, right? As a company, if you have any data, if the data cannot go to the extent of data to insight, and insight to action, and action to impact, right, your metrics is actually useless. Yeah? If you can't really connect the dots between data, insight, action, and impact, so I'll leave with that thought. So go back to your own goals, your own KRAs. When it comes to your own data, to the relevant target group, may it be CEO, may it be managers, may it be employees, what are you communicating, right? Why are you communicating, right? How frequently you do that? If the relevance of purpose is not there, right, it's not taken care of. So my only simple, humble request to you is go back and look at your own scorecards, and being HR, right? Bharathan was talking about having a seat on the table, right? But unless and until you have these 2 metrics linkage back to any of your goals, if you are not supporting the organization's revenue, or if you are not supporting the growth and margins of the company, right? Top line and bottom line. If any of your actions are not relating back to the goals, what the company and the CEO would like to achieve, I think a metric may not be very relevant for that ecosystem at the point of time. So take an example of, Bala spoke about teams like resource management group, right? If resource management group as a function do not think about utilization, right, which will have a direct impact on the company's margin, if they don't think about billability, right, what percentage of a billable talent, which will help in driving a revenue on top, Or if you are an HR person, right, if you don't think about, while you report attrition as a very key metric, but if you don't think about what is the cost of hiring for replacements, then many of your decisions will be easier actually, right? Because today we as HR will go back and justify saying why a special increase cannot be given to somebody who's an niche skill, whereas the competition is willing to offer a 70% increase for somebody, right? But if you're able to go back and look at what is your benchmark of salaries today for that skill, right, for that experience, if you really believe that you're already paying at P50 level or whatever it is, and it is okay for you to make that difference for somebody who's really the topmost performer and do a P70, P90 correction, I think it is still valid, right? So unless and until you go back to the core of why are you doing it, right, for what you're doing it, if that is not impacting your company's revenue and margin, I think you're really not doing that job, right? So again, I'm not giving you a lot of metrics per se, but just keep this in mind on how you are relating it back to the larger ecosystem of, right, why you are existing as an org. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mahinder. So data, insight that drives action. That's our takeaway from the examples. And impact, absolutely. And impact to be customized based on the sector, based on the organization, based on that year's operating margins, profitability, revenue targets, customer referenceability, whatever may be your metrics that you're looking. Great. We now move on to the third audience poll now. Time for our mobile phone screens again. We would love to know about which skills do you find most useful when dealing with challenging situations. If you could please give us your votes. Decision making is definitely winning the race right now, followed equally by communication and empathy. They both went up and down at the same time. Okay, decision making again, followed very closely by communication. Interestingly, the pink bar, which is conflict resolution, doesn't seem to be getting most votes. Although we in HR seem to constantly find ourselves mediating between people. People don't get along with each other, they don't want to work with each other, they don't like to see each other, they refuse to, collaborate on projects because of interpersonal issues. So that's quite interesting, actually.
Maybe we avoid conflicts, right?
Maybe we are avoiding conflicts. Okay, that's a great way to look at it.
But your campaign worked
So
from
they're very
2
good
to
in
25.
decision making to not get into conflicts.
Yeah, maybe we are deciding that, okay, two people are not getting along, let's just separate them and live a peaceful life, right? Okay, so clearly we have decision making in the first rank, followed by communication, followed by empathy, finally followed by conflict resolution. A big thank you to the 6 of you who have voted conflict resolution, because I would have put my vote there as well. So I'm not alone then. Great, so decision-making skills and communication seem to be the top 2 most voted useful skills to deal with challenging leadership situations. So a question for Soumya. Soumya, if you could share with us a typical leadership challenge that you faced and how you went about navigating that.
Yep. So this is an instance which is very sensitive. There was an ethical dilemma in this, and it's one of the members from the HR team, and she was a manager. She was reporting into me. Unfortunately, for some reason, I think under financial pressure, there was a pilferage. So there was a laptop which was missing, and there was a video evidence of her having taken it. And by virtue of her long-term service in the organization, the CEO and the founder were of the opinion that, we should just let it go. It's okay. I was fairly new into the system, probably about 3-4 months old, and still getting my feet wet. So I took the stance that for certain things, it is zero tolerance, and ethically and otherwise, since HR is also the custodian of values of the organization, and we set the standards of behavior, we need to role model what the organization needs to follow. And therefore, whether this person is from the HR or from any other function for that matter, since it's been also proven beyond doubt that it did happen, I shouldn't be overlooking it as an HR leader. And I would submit the same for the consideration of the CEO and the founder as well. So we went up and down on this with discussions with, the CEO even extending an arm and saying, let me talk to your team and get your views. I said, do what you will, but my belief is this, that, we need to take a stance on certain things, and my decision making here is very clear. Whatever the conflict, whatever the reasoning, I think I stand by this. This is what I had very clearly communicated. Eventually, we also had, it was very hurtful as an HR head to go around the company and have remarks, very snide remarks made about, if you're in HR, you can get away with anything. You can do anything and get away with anything. So one of these statements was made in the corridor by a manager, and the CEO was also with me. So I went back to the CEO's cabin and I told him, this is exactly what we wanted to avoid, and see where we are. And after about a week or so, the CEO himself came back and told me, we go with you in this. So I think in decision making, what is very important is for us leaders to have conviction. And once we have the conviction, also the commitment and the confidence to take it forward. A lot of this is to do with common sense. So just drive it with common sense and with a lot of empathy and with the complete cognition that you're donning this role where you're going to toe a path where others are also going to follow. So be very, very cautious about that. Tread carefully. It is walking on thin ice many times for us as leaders, but decision making is key. And if we were to avoid conflicts all the time, perhaps most decisions that we make would be wrong. So never buckle under the pressure. Never go with what the majority says. It's not democratic everywhere, every time. It is definitely a clear shade of difference in terms of what we want to drive as values, what we stand for as values in an organization. And I think we should demonstrate that in action, whatever we do there in the organization as leaders. So that's something we need to propagate as HR leaders, and that's something that I want to advocate myself, irrespective of conflicts and irrespective of how unpopular we become at the end of the day. So it's not a popularity game, like how Bharat pointed out. How nice do you want to be versus how effective do you want to be? So that's the difference. And if that pendulum swings in the right direction, I think we've got it as HR leaders. That's my response to one of the most sensitive situations. A very sad incident, but yeah, I recount that immediately.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Soumya. I think everything she shared, every sentence had so many different aspects that we can all take home with us regarding conviction and values-driven leadership, etc. Jayman, would you like to add something to what Soumya said? What has been your experience?
Well, actually, I can actually resonate with what Soumya was saying, in the sense that decision making, that is one of the most important things, because if you don't take a decision, then nothing happens, right? I mean, you can be indecisive and you can prolong on it, because one of the famous, or not famous, one of the most viral thing which about the HR folks, I mean, it's making actually a fun of about ourselves is, I'm sure that you might have seen this picture maybe in WhatsApp or somewhere else. There's a skeleton sitting like that. Hope you'd have remember what it is. And the caption is, HR will get back to you. So that person was waiting and waiting for that HR to get back, and he died and became a skeleton also. So that's one of the things, it's a decision making. Of course, we might make a decision, we may, mostly we don't happen. I mean, I know that in most of us, though we don't want to admit, but we mostly don't tell the candidate that if they are not selected, they are not selected. We only tell the candidate who has been selected. So, I mean, decision making is a very important thing, and of course that communication of that decision. So that is the second part to it, is the communication part. If you don't communicate as a leader, communication makes the most important aspect in an organization, because that is where the aspect of trust, which Bala was saying, and he was also saying, and Mr. Bharathan was also saying, that trust is the most important thing in an organization that actually binds the organization together. That will be the foundation for any of the values what an organization brings in. For example, if you look at the Great Place to Work certification, the most important part they measure is the trust index. Maybe some of your organizations would have gone through that. We had went through it recently in the last year. And fortunately, we have been certified as the Great Place to Work in this year in January 2024. So that was the biggest thing, was the trust index. That encompasses everything in that organization. It shows that how transparent your communications are, how good you take care of your employees, and how the employees view our organization, the perception about the organization. So as a leader, that is our responsibility to create that culture of trust in it. And one thing I want to actually compliment what Soumya was saying on the change management. So we did one small change management in the organization, was creating a culture of appreciation. Because what we found is that we are good at blaming others, right? When somebody does anything wrong, everybody jumps on it. But if somebody does anything good, okay, you did good, and that's it. We don't even talk about it, or maybe we might talk it in private and may say, okay, you did a good job. And sometimes, I mean, most of the organizations have a reward and recognition system, right, which we may give it on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, or maybe on an annual basis. But do we have to wait for recognition to be given and wait for a month? So what we have done is we wanted to create a culture of appreciation within the organization. We created instant recognition. We do have this monthly, quarterly, yearly, all those recognitions are there. But apart from that, we have an instant recognition. What we go with the smiley cards. There are physical smiley cards which we have printed in the shape of that smiley face. And anybody can recognize anybody. It's not that a manager has to recognize the team member. No, the team member can recognize the manager. It is cross-functional. It is anywhere, anybody you can recognize. It doesn't cost you anything. And what we have done is we have kept all these smiley cards across the factory, across the offices, everywhere. And people also carry it when they walk around. So, and when you see something good, we just give it by writing a small sentence in it. And what I thought was, okay, this is a great way of doing it, and it took some time for people to get accustomed to it. But one of the beautiful examples where I felt so happy about it is that when this smiley card was given externally to somebody, and the incident was that there was a traffic police guy in Sholinganallur. His name is Kumar, if I'm not wrong. He's a constable. The way in which he controls the traffic is very unconventional way. Maybe you would have, there was an article about him in the newspaper. He actually makes it very dramatic the way he dances, he shows movements like this, and not like your normal traffic stop and all. He shows it's very animated way of doing it. So I saw one of our associate who was there, and I was also there in that, somewhere slightly behind that associate. And this associate, what he did, it was a red signal for us, so we were just waiting for the signal to become green. And this guy, he went to that Mr. Kumar, and gave him a smiley card, saying that he liked the way in which he is doing the traffic management. And everybody who saw this, they understood that something good thing is happening there. Everybody clapped there, who were the pedestrians, and I'm not sure how many people clapped when they were inside the car. But this is one of the example where what we started in our organization has actually moved out of the organization. That is what we feel that the success of the change management process. Because as a culture, I don't know that we always appreciate people. We don't. We may say that appreciation in a private thing, and we blame people in public. So as a leader, I think that is one of the things that we should do the reverse. Maybe. In case if you're blaming somebody or give them a dressing down, it should be in private, and the appreciation should be in the public. So there is one example which I wanted to say, because it was deep within inside that I want to share this, because it's one of the beautiful examples which I've seen that a company initiative has been given externally and without anybody asking for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Praise in public, give feedback in private. And also the power or the value of recognizing somebody doesn't take too much money. Sometimes we end up putting too much of budgets to reward and recognition programs, and they take a year or so to even get approvals. But spot recognition, small creative ways of saying thank you, I appreciate you, goes a long way. We talked a lot about trust, and that brings us to the final question in our panel discussion today, after which we will be opening it up to the audience. Right, Anshika? When we talk of trust, as custodians of values in the organization, custodians of culture, right? The way we onboard, orient, we bring in people, we do refresher courses, we have e-learning programs, we train managers. When there are grievances and issues, we resolve them. We take care of violations. There are policies to handle that. So all of these touch points to protect the organization culture. However, show of hands again, how many of us feel that gossip, politics, right, is in organizations actually has a massive impact on culture? Gossip and politics. Thank you so much for that overwhelming response. So I would invite Mahindran to please share with us. Mahindran, how do we go about handling this invisible thing that typically happens in cars parking spaces, scooter parking spaces, water cooler areas, WhatsApp, Telegram, Slack, maybe I'm missing some other social media channel, but how do we deal with this as HR leaders?
Okay, interesting question. And given all the millennials and Gen Z crowd are putting me in spot, right? You all love gossips, right? How many of you don't love gossips? Okay. Oh, there's one person in the room. Everybody else loves.
We got two.
Oh,
Uma also said, I don't like that.
Very good. So, see, see, how do you put it, right? It's not about gossips or rumors, right? It's all about why something emanates. Yeah. See, if you go back to the core values of the company, right? There's something called the transparency. Yeah. And companies may define the levels of transparency based on maturity or whatever it is, right? And they could have confidentiality clauses on when they want to talk about something, why they want to talk about it, etc., etc. I think when you have the connections so well today, right? Not just see the times of industrial era, it's all about discussions. You need to meet people, right? Talk to them, and then get to know about whatever. But in a social era like this, you don't have to wait for anything, right? As the event happens now, right? That there could be discussions happening outside about the event, right? So we are in that. So my point is, rather than talking about or thinking about how do we stop rumors, how do we stop, right, some of those negativities around, if we can start thinking about positively moving those for success, right? See, why do we do that? If you really go back and ask, right, is it psychological, or is it biological or chemical, or why we love doing gossips, why we talk about them, etc. Right? See, you know this dopamine effect, yeah? Runners, any chocolate lovers,
Yeah.
right? Filter coffee, you get a hype of dopamine effect. The same thing what happens, right, when you have the gossips and rumors. And there is a Fortune article which talks about it, right? Hey, in workplace you can't avoid it. It will be there. But how do you take that and position it positively, right? Without impacting negatively for the company, for the people around. If you can just, HR can be sensitive about it, right? Not just HR, right? I think many a times we end up saying that any of these tough questions or issues HR need to solve. It's not about that, right? As managers, as leaders, as colleagues, as peers, if you can start thinking about what is good, what is bad, and make sure you let out things that is relevant and where you are really conscious and confident of, right, what you want to do for the company. You don't do about your own family, right? Which means that let's have the purpose of doing it right for the company and for the large workforce that we have. I think it's all about individuals' perspective more than generalizing, saying that, right, hey, gossips and rumors are bad, right? And the last thing on politics, I think I would not get well too much into it, but it's all about, it is not a culture created by a larger group of population or whatever. I think end of the day, if you get to the crux of why some issue happens, it is political, etc., you can drill it down to one person creating it. And all that matters is go back and give the feedback directly, saying that, hey, what you are doing is not the right thing to do from the company's culture standpoint. We don't have to be that political. We can be transparent, right? Things can change when you start driving it directly. The messages then trying to dilute, water it down through multiple issues, right? I would stop there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mahinder. And so 3 T's from whatever he shared: trust, build trust, create transparency. If people are gossiping about something, they are working with inadequate information, they're hearing the wrong rumors. So as HR, make sure the transparency is set. We share information that is relevant with the right groups. And third, if there are some individuals creating the wrong perceptions in spite of trying to help them, coach them, counseling, take timely action. That's the third T. Just trust, transparency, timely action. Thank you so much, Mahinder. On that note, we open up the floor to the audience in case anybody has any questions for our esteemed panelists. Any questions? Yes? Can we pass a mic there? The first question is from this table in the front, yeah?
So my question is to Jaimon. You spoke about enabling employees' career aspirations, right? So, I'm with you on this. So I'm someone who believes that retention is the new recruitment. But when in today's business environment, where the business thrives on a customer satisfaction, how to enable the employee aspiration? Like even if you want to buy some time, for the employee to enable the career aspiration. We need to tell them that okay, wait, we are working on that, but we also need to build that trust that we are working on their request. So my question is how we can buy that time to enable the employees' career aspirations.
All right.
You
So,
want to take the mic?
is it audible without a mic, or you need a mic?
Yeah, we might need a mic at the back.
Okay, fine. So that's a good question. I mean, that is one aspect which we were also wondering at that point of time how to go about it. But what we did was when we look at the career aspiration of an employee, for example, I'll tell you which is the real thing which actually happened. We had a function called service delivery. It's in the telecom, so they take care of all the customers and all this kind of stuff. So what happens is that one of the associate, she wanted to move into HR. She was hired for service delivery and she worked in service delivery for some time. But then she wanted to move to HR. So what we did, we told her that these are the competencies and skills which is required to be in HR, and these are the skills which you already have in service delivery. That's why she's already there. And this is if you're very serious about coming to HR, these are the skills. And we assessed that person and assess the competencies and said, this is where you are. This is where the required competencies needs to be. So there is a gap, right? For that, fill that gap, there are certain development interventions which is needed. So we charted out certain developmental plans and said that first you have to undergo through these developmental plans, and once you reach to, if not fully to the competency level, but at least some percentages which is closer to that, you can move. So that is the time frame which we have. And based on that, we do initiate the developmental plans and the activities also, so that the associate knows, yes, this will happen provided I learns all those things faster and my skill level reaches there. So it may take some time. I'm not saying that immediately when somebody says that I want to move to HR, that you will move to HR. No, it won't happen just like that. So this is what the transition plan was, and it took around some 6 to 7 months, if I remember. So after that, she moved into HR, and she worked there for quite some time in HR. That's how it was. The similar way we did in the other functions also. So it's not immediately you move it, but the trust is built by creating a clear plan. This is what you do with the milestones in it. I hope I answered your question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just to add on, right? We talk about gig. How many of you are talking about internal gig? We had a typical case of people. So, for example, let's take need skill. Let's say, for example, Gen AI. When you have Gen AI in your team and the demand for Gen AI is too high, right? Most of the people, at least Gen Z, right? They want to be in the cutting edge of the technologies, right? So they may be in Java or they may be in the regular skills. They want to move to Gen AI, right? So I'm talking about a typical example of how we handle one of the case to retain, right? So we made the employee to go through certain courses, and his aspiration was to get into Gen AI. Along with the regular work, what he was doing as a developer, right? So we also made him as an internal gig, where he was doing a shadow resource for one particular account. Through that, he was also learning new aspects of Gen AI, and now after 4 months, he is a build resource for Gen AI account. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Just to add on to what both Jemon and Bala have told, see, companies have nowadays also looked at not a linear growth path all the time. We are talking about an era where there is a collage of different kinds of roles happening in organizations. And what matters more is how do you actually define the descriptions and the competencies very clearly, So anyone who aspires, whether you put it on IJP, internal job posting, or whatever other way that others transparently are aware of these kinds of positions happening within the organization, then it is easier for them. The more clarity they have on what are the requirements for that role and what do you have to meet, then the employees also have clarity in terms of what will that climb demand and how do we plan for that. There could be some amount of internal enablement, and there is also a sense of ownership from the employee that needs to come in. So it's like the insurance copay that we are talking about, right? It's not like all the way whatever the employee wants, we enable it. That's the balance we need to strike, because at the end of the day, that transition of that employee from there creates some kind of a void there in that system. So how are they going to fulfill that? So we need to look at an interplay of a whole lot of cross-functional things out here, along with the business having a sense of, I have to let go because there is an engagement related benefit that I get out of this. So many times we also see engagement, when we talk engagement, not even from the HR I hear this, engagement means fun. Engagement means balloon, engagement means cake cutting. Is that what engagement is? So that is something for each of us in HR to think about and go back and assert ourselves saying, engagement is not in cake cutting, birthdays, balloons and parties. Engagement is every interface, every touch point with the employee. What do we do there to add value? How do we make a difference? How do we build that brand? And how do we attract? And that is what is meaningful for the employee along that journey, right? So I think what we all collectively also are trying to advocate here is, yes, we are looking at career development, we are giving opportunities, but it is not whatever the employee wants at any cost. That is definitely not the way we need to look at it. Whatever role is being created or is already there, what value does that employee bring into that, and how do we make sure that value gets added? Enablement, yes, but not enablement at any cost. Ultimately, it is the business purpose that needs to be upheld, and that is when that seat of the table is assured for you, and that is when not only the seat at the table, in fact today if you read up and if you are following David McLean and other people, they are not only talking about having a seat at the table or at the boardroom, they are saying move towards shareholder value. What is the HR going to do for stakeholders? So the whole paradigm of HR is going towards something which is huge, very meaningful, and a mammoth responsibility lies with all of us as leaders to actually start learning and moving up that curve to deliver what is best for the business and the ecosystem around. And we are always talking about the larger social aspects in terms of CSR and DI and inclusivity and everything. We have our expert here who will also be talking about it. Hi, Soundarya. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Soumya.
About this from me.
Thank you, Soumya. So, as you can see, there's a treasure trove of rich experience that each of our panelists brings. We are sure there may be more questions. We'd be very happy to take it offline during the next networking event. Dr. Soundarya is here. We warmly welcome her on behalf of the entire panel. And we'd love to make sure that we go on to the next session. Closing comments in our preceding session, Bharathan shared about the importance of connecting business results, speaking business language. Throughout the panel discussion, we talked about metrics. We talked about balancing employee aspirations with business results, and we have now concluded with parting comments from all of our panelists in terms of making sure that we are constantly winning hearts and minds together in the HR fraternity. On that note, thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for your enthusiastic participation in the polls and for your questions and comments and the show of hands. A big thank you to all of our panelists as well for your rich insights. Thank you, everybody.